Have you ever seen that show, Drunk History?
I have not.
Oh, it's funny. They get sometimes they're celebrities, sometimes to some level, and there's this guy who's on every show. He's the narrator, and they tell stories, historical little anecdotes that are interesting through history about people, but they get sauced before they do it. So I think the person has to learn a lot before they get, and then they're just reiterating what they learned. And they're
Right.
telling the story, and they're drunk while they do it, and it's hilarious. I mean, it's been on for several seasons now, but it makes me laugh, and you learn something. But I don't know if it fits in with the culture of not glamorizing alcohol and that the Army has. But
I think I
yeah.
think in kind of the way we grew up, at least in the Army of the time where we were in it, it was hard to separate alcohol from what we were doing. It would have been tough.
Yeah. And I don't know that that was a bad thing. It could get bad, and you had to put a governor on it. But those were really fun times.
Oh yeah, I
There
agree.
was more good than bad back then when you look back at it. I mean, concussions are a big thing now, but we were playing football, tackle football out on that field there, like every weekend, smashing our heads. And that would probably not be a good thing. I mean, didn't they outlaw push ball?
Yeah, they did, and it was shortly after our time. It wasn't too many years after we were gone, and they were like, "Hey, why are we doing this? What is the goal here? We're killing each other." And that was the
Yeah,
goal, to kill each other.
yeah, I know. I heard we'd lose more people during that week than we would to injuries than we would jumping all year long.
That's probably
But
right.
I tell you, it was some of my best memories of that. I can't imagine what life's like without that. For those guys there.
One of the things that was interesting looking back on my time anyway was how competitive our battalion was. If we put together some type of a team, we were in the running to win that
Oh,
competition.
with everything. Oh my God, yes. Even everything from all the sports to color guard. And we were always proud of our guys that went up to represent us. And we just had an attitude like we were the guys to beat in everything. And it kind of captured in the mantra of old Sergeant Major Adams. We aren't three quarters of nothing. I always wondered to myself, like, well, is it that big of a deal to say we're three-quarter ADA? But he says it is, so it is. But it was just like an excuse to have a chip on your shoulder. They're like, we're third of the fourth. We ain't three quarters of nothing. And that whole attitude permeated everything we did. And I really think what helped that is because is that Stinger missile jump pad, because that was symbolic. You always got the door position. And whenever you were a jump master up at Green Rat and you were an ADA guy, so they'd ask for your help. The jump masters would ask for your help with that SMJP. And it just, in that culture, gave you so much credibility. And people would look at you from a distance, those ADA guys jumping out the door and going, thank God I don't have that thing. And then I got to lug it around when I get on the ground. I mean, it was that I think that was a seed, or the little dust that the raindrop gathered around and created the whole storm, was that SMJP.
I agree.
I know this: the battalion, the core of the battalion, like no other place in the Army. That I was never in a Ranger battalion. Maybe it's the case there, but the Corps is that NCO Corps. I mean, more than anywhere else. So if you were an officer and you showed up, it was like they'd hand you a unit. It was like giving you a thoroughbred at the Kentucky Derby, and you're the jockey. I mean, you don't really matter that much. Your job's just not to screw it up. And if you don't, you get to be there for the party, and everybody likes you. But don't let your ego get in the way, and let that horse carry you to where you need to go. And that was the NCOs, and it was wonderful just being adopted by them. I think there's no place like that. And that's what kept it going. And I remember in my platoon, I had, three platoon sergeants that I think the only place they had gone was to Korea for a year. Edwards, Dimitri Smith, and Oh my gosh. There was, man, Demetrius Smith Edwards and second, and I had Sergeant Walker, and there was also Santana.
Francisco Santana.
Yeah.
He was one of my squad leaders. He's a great guy. He was a great guy.
Yeah, Knotts was my motor sergeant. Remember him?
Right.
Yeah, man.
Do me a favor. Tell me a little bit about joining the Army and how it all started. Tell me where you're from, about how you ended up in the military, and then that kind of thing. Fill me in if you don't mind.
Wow, that can actually go pretty deep. I went into the National Guard and I signed in January. I went to a private high school called Our Lady of Good Counsel, and no one really went in the military from there. And there was a Marine recruiter that came to the school, and I don't think he ever came back. And I remember slipping him the phone directory of the students there. And then he called my mom. So I thought that's what I wanted to do, go in the Marines. And he called my mom once and gave a different name. And I remember thinking, hey, that guy, I know that was that sergeant from the Marine Corps, but he gave my mom, he thought because other kids in the private school would, parents wouldn't like the military. I mean, this was in the 80s, and the Contras were a big deal, and they had missions going down to support them. So there was a lot of anti-Reagan, Grenada, like, why'd we do that, was in my senior year there. So the school didn't think too highly of that. But when that sergeant changed his name to talk to my mom, I didn't like that. That just was a turnoff. And then I met a guy named Sergeant Hartle, who was an E5 in the National Guard that fought in the Korean War. And I really liked him, so I enlisted in the National Guard. And then when I got down there, I mean, when I first got to basic training, I thought, wow, I really made a big mistake. I don't like this, but now I'm stuck here. And then by the time I was through it, then I was like proud I got through it. And then the values sunk in and what made me feel good about myself. And then I stayed with it. And when I went to college, I did ROTC. So I paid for my college with a National Guard check, a Montgomery GI Bill check, and my ROTC check.
Oh, wow.
Tutored a little bit. And then I did that. And then I was commissioned out of school, and then I was off to the races.
So tell me about, showing up at the battalion. Tell me, were you a lieutenant? You've been to Airborne?
No, I was a captain. It was just before I went into Charlie Battery. And I got into command. I think I showed up in the summer, but I was in command by December, which I was really, really excited about, because there was like a line of people that you'd get in. You had to get in line to get command. And you had to get through jump master school too.
Right.
So I got a jump master slot. We were doing that Operation Big Drop stuff. So it gave me an opportunity to lead. I don't know if you remember, but when for Big Drop and then Haiti, we were the push battalion, right?
Right.
So up at Green Ramp, I got put in charge as the assistant S3 to run the operation up there.
Oh, wow.
But running the operation's a little different there than it would be somewhere else. It's like NCOs had all the details, and I just coordinated and asked them what they needed and ran around a bit, and they wound up making me look really good. And so after that, and then Haiti went down, and then it was turned off. The narrative went to, hey, we were being left out, to, hey, what did the 82nd do great here? Well, it had the largest airborne operation to put in the air since Market Garden. And who did that? Third of the fourth. And I remember it was my first MSM I got. And the infantry guys were kind of all upset because they were planning the mission long before I came along. And it gave me this, it was an opportunity. And jump master school was in the middle of that, the series of big drops, remember those? And then I did well, and I got through jump master school, and boom, then I got put in command at Charlie Battery. And it was just the thrill of my life. And I had I first worked for Major Williams and then Major Cox when Major Williams became the XO, and Colonel Younger was in there, and they just they did really right by me, and just a wonderful experience. And I really learned there how not to micromanage. How one thing about the 82nd is that all the programs that are supposed to work there. Even I had never seen, you know, that little lapel pin you give a guy for re-enlisting?
Right.
Well, nobody in the Army, I've never seen that before. I get to the 82nd, a guy's walking around with this shiny pin on his, or was it ETS or it was re-enlisting? What was it?
They had different pins. They had 2 different pins, but the ETS pin was the big one.
Okay, the ETS,
I think that's
and
the
they
one
wear it on their uniform there, and I never saw that. I remember going up to the guy and go, "What's that? A pledge pin on your uniform?" I didn't know what it was, and even a program like that works there.
Right.
Like everything you're supposed to do, there's somebody in charge of somebody doing it right there, and it's all because of these NCOs and everybody wanting to be in that battalion, and it was remarkable. So you really got to learn a lot there. I think it would be a bad experience to be there forever as an officer, because then you go somewhere else and then all of a sudden bad stuff happens and you weren't micromanaging when you needed to.
Right.
It wouldn't be good for your development to spend your whole career there, I think, and then leave as a lieutenant colonel and go somewhere else. You'd be shocked.
One of the interesting things about Bragg is when you get in there, you become part of a machine that's already rolling. And so you have to conform. And the machine's been rolling for a long time. They've been doing this 18-hour sequence and practicing for it.
That's right.
For decades. And,
right.
And so those NCOs, exactly like you're talking about, that have been through ORS after ORS, and you just rely on them to take care of it and get it done.
You really need to be good though at you got to be good at PT. You got to know land nav. I mean, you got to be a good soldier to survive as an officer there. And if you have that going, then they'll teach you everything else you need to know. And you're right, but it is rolling. And that 18-hour sequence is everything in the vocabulary. But the way they just embrace you and brought me in, and it was just, don't mess it up. And that's what I would tell my kid if he went there. I'm like, you're gonna love it. Don't let your ego get in the way. You're the jockey on the winning thoroughbred. I mean, it's like Seattle Slew. You just get on and don't fall off. Do what you're supposed to do, and you're gonna cross that finish line. That's all you got. It's easy. It really was an easy place to be an officer, as long as you could do that basic minimum stuff. You wouldn't want to go there as an out of shape guy that doesn't know how a compass works. Yeah.
So where did you, tell me about your career, a bigger picture. Now, you were my battalion commander at Bliss at 552 ADA.
That's right. That's right. Looking back at it, I went from battery command in the 82nd to being an intern on the Joint Staff. And I went to the J5 URDIV when the Balklands and the Kosovo and all that was happening, which is the political Pall Mill part of the Joint Staff, which is an entirely different experience. But once you get that Pentagon stink on you and you don't fail there, they want you back. And it's kind of an invite only place. So as a captain, I was there 4 years. So I would just go from the Pentagon to the field to do my branch qualifying jobs and come back. So it struck me the other day. It's sad like how much Pentagon time I have compared to time I had out in the field. But I was a battery commander in the 82nd. Then I went from the Joint Staff. I went to the Army Staff. I was an Army Secretariat. And then I came back to be the 21S3. And I was the 21S3 for OIF1. And we swole up to 14 batteries at one time there.
Oh,
and Colonel D'Antonio was my battalion commander.
Right.
And then from there, I got the gig to be the speechwriter for the Chief of Staff of the Army. So I was in and the only other place I went to the Naval War College for a year, but I went back, went to IF1, and I left. They pulled me out of there before the unit even came back. And I was the chief of staff speechwriter for 3 years. And then I went into battalion command. And then after that, I went to the Pentagon, and I've never got out of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, you know, that most of my time's been in DC, but my favorite time was always, you know, down there with the line units.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I
still now.
It's a culture that I don't, you know, quite understand. There's got to be a different challenge to being in that building. The only time I was there, I remember watching like 25 full bird colonels come walking by, and I was just like, golly, I didn't even know there was that many in the Army.
You know, I had an appointment for Haas when I was a second lieutenant to get my mess dress blues. And I went into the Pentagon because that's where the guy was going to do all the measurements. And I'd never been in the Pentagon. So, and this is before OBC. So I go in there, and my appointment was like at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I kept getting bumped by colonels and generals, and I didn't get taped till like 4 or 5 o'clock.
Wow.
And I stood there. Yeah, they just kept bumping me.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Yeah, and so now it's kind of like that. And every now and then I'll see a captain, and I'm like, whoa, what's that guy doing in here?
But you have a jump story? Did you ever have a situation or a jump master duty that was interesting to you?
Well, they all were. I mean, I've landed in the trees. I mean, I don't think one really. I mean, we've done in-flight rigging coming back from Arkansas. One time we jumped into Arkansas with 3rd Brigade, and something happened that we couldn't get planes, and we were locked down for a while, like a week extra, just in the field in Arkansas, and they're dropping MREs to us. And then we got on aircraft and we flew back and we did in-flight rigging. I know one that stood out is I was the airborne commander on one. It was when I was Charlie Battery, and I think it was a daytime jump. I mean, most of my jumps, because I was too busy and I didn't really chase, most of my jumps were mass tacks with the brigade.
Right.
But this one was a daytime jump where I was the airborne commander. So it was like a Charlie Battery bird where we're getting our jump masters, and it might've been SMJP. And we were flying and fuel was leaking out the wing, you know, fuel was flying out. And the pilot said to me, we're going to have to do an emergency landing at Poe. And he said, you have the option to bail your guys out now or do the landing with us. And I was like, what? Seriously? It's that serious? And I looked out the window, you know, the door was closed, and I looked out the window and I saw that sombrero of south of the border, and we were flying up 95. And I'm like, there's no effing way. I want to tell, like, no, we'll ride it out. And then we landed, and then they hit the emergency alarm. I remember running, and then a seatbelt got tagged to my stuff and like threw me up and landed on my back. And I think Cavazos got a big laugh out of that. Remember Cavazos? Man, that was one tough guy. You know, he was always an impressive guy to me, and he really became a legend over in the infantry as a sergeant major. You know, I don't know if you followed him, but he's larger than life to the soldiers he wound up leading.
Are we talking about Staff Sergeant Cavazos?
Well, he was an E5 when I was a battery commander. But yeah, he branched. He went over to the infantry when he re-enlisted sometime after I left, and then he became a sergeant major in one of the brigades. And
I gotta check that out.
He lost an eye. I'm friends with him on Facebook, so you can reach out to him there.
Okay.
But he was shot in the head, lost an eye, and then did a tour after that.
Oh, wow.
And I think he was in the hospital when Labella, do you remember Labella?
Yeah.
Al Labella? Al Labella went to the hospital and ran into him after he had been shot.
Wow.
But yeah, he was man, I saw him knock a guy out one time. I mean, there were just some tough dudes at that battalion. I mean, tough dudes. They don't make them like that. Look, I played college hockey at 50 years old for Georgetown.
Wow.
And would get out on the ice and I'd have butterflies when I get out there. But I'm telling you, they don't. And look, I made the team. I barely made the team. I worked hard to make the team. So I wasn't, I was the worst guy on the team, but they got me on the team. But when I was out there there weren't guys, where my head would be on a swivel and there were guys could outskate me, but there was nobody where I was like, oh, that dude can definitely kick my ass. I mean, at 50 years old, I didn't see it there. But at Fort Bragg, there was like more than half the guys that I was like, man, I just did Edwards, Somer, remember that guy? And he was an Arnold wrestler. I mean, they were just like I'm lucky to be here. I'm not, there's no way. But they just don't make them like they did. I don't think anymore. I don't know if it's people are eating too much McDonald's, but I remember we would go to the pit. Before the Army had combatives, we'd go to the pit once a quarter and everybody got to pick somebody to fight and then you could get picked. And it didn't matter what rank you were. And I remember Knotts and Edwards teamed up and the whole place's jaw dropped like, oh my God, we don't want any one of these guys to lose, right. Yeah. But those dudes were tough.
Like I was looking at the other day, somebody sent me some pictures of blood wings, where Major Williams, I think, was getting his blood wings. And I wrote a little article about it.
I saw it.
I had a cherry party where they threw me out of the second-story window. I was tied to a rope and they told me
that's
I
was
a bit jumper.
Yeah, that's a bit much. Somebody get really hurt doing that.
Yeah, but that's what had happened to me. I lived through it. Was I mad? No, I was proud to have been ushered into the club, right?
I liked it. We had prop blast.
Right.
And I think I had to like walk up Ardennes with 550 cord tied to a dead possum. I think you'd go to jail for doing that to somebody today.
Yeah, probably.
But it made, there's a fine line between, like, that stuff can get out of hand when it's mean-spirited. But there's a fine line between the thrill of going through a rites of passage and then being abusive. And there, at third or the fourth of my time, it was never really abusive. It was like people wanted you to succeed. People wanted you to get through it. So I think there was always some kind of, it wasn't meant to hurt anybody. But you do see that elsewhere just getting out of hand. So I guess, these days just times change, but that was a wonderful, magical place. And I'm sure it still is, but it's not in division anymore. I guess I don't know how that is.
So I have a theory. It's condensed even further. Now it's in Echo Battery. That's still the folks that are jumping. So that spirit that was in, third or the fourth in a heyday when we had the Vulcans and the Stingers, and we transitioned over to the Avengers. That was a definite heyday when we were jumping the SMJPs. But hey, that Echo Battery still exists, and they're still out there jumping, and they got the best jump masters in the world. They're in the 82nd when third or the fourth was there. We were, man, don't put a competition out there. We're gonna win it. That's for sure.
No. Yep. And softball. And I remember one football game where, the two best teams on all of the division, one was like an all battalion team. The other one was Charlie Battery.
Oh, wow.
And we played each other, and Sergeant Major and Colonel Woods were there, and it got so competitive and then so rough that we were ignoring the referees and we were arguing with each other. And it was like we were reffing the game like we would a pickup game. And then we were arguing, but we didn't need and we look at the refs like, look, we got this, shut up. And like, no, you did that, you were offside. And it wasn't that people were trying to cheat each other, but we were like brothers playing in the backyard. Right. And it was like somebody from the neighborhood thinking they're going to come down and adjudicate this. We weren't buying it. So there was more, it wasn't that there was any problem, but the game was taking so long because we were just ignoring the refs that they called it. And I remember being like, oh no, and now I got to walk over to Sergeant Major Adams and Colonel Woods. And I was like hanging my head because I was on the field when they called it. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be in trouble because this is going to be a black mark. And when I walked over there, Sergeant Major was shaking his head with a smile. And I could tell they weren't mad. They were almost relieved because they didn't want a winner.
Yeah.
They wanted both guys. And what everybody did is they went back to the barracks and said, well, we really would have won. And we were winning. And so everybody went home feeling like they won. And that was like the best thing that the battalion commander and the sergeant major, the best outcome that could happen is that they called the game.
Oh yeah, that's excellent. They were probably over there slipped them a 20 to call it.
It may be, but it was contested. I mean, there was a lot going on. And I just loved being a part of that and being just as an officer, being one of the guys, like, playing the sports with them, jumping with them. They respect, it gave you an opportunity for them to respect you because you did what they did. And in the Patriot world, it's not like that because you're doing something different than what they're doing. And not that the Patriot world was bad. And I was very proud of my time in 2-1 and my command, but it's different at 3rd of the 4th.
Oh yeah.
And it's an honor to be an officer and be, it was just an honor to be supported and surrounded by those guys. You never hear those guys talk bad about their unit. All right, I'm going to tell you an embarrassing story that I probably shouldn't tell publicly, but I'm going to do it because it talks about 3rd of the 4th. But my daughter, I have one daughter down in Florida that's a bit of a ruffian. Like, she's like a kind of girl that would get in fight in high school and put it on YouTube. I mean, very down in the redneck Riviera down there. And she's too much like her dad. And it's not something I'm particularly proud of, but in a weird way I am. So it's like, so she was working at a bingo hall. And she's a skinny little bit too, but she was working in a bingo hall at about 18 years old. And she would always come up and spend time up at Fort Bragg with me. And this guy who was running the bingo hall would harass the young girls there. And he was like an older guy and he was like trying to hit on the young girls that worked there. And she didn't like him at all. And he said, he used to brag about how he was in the 82nd. So she snapped one day and said, you know what? You were never in the 82nd. And she, because she just knew by his mannerisms, the way he behaved. And the thing that got her was that the guys in the 82nd, when she saw elsewhere in the Army compared to the 82nd, the guys in the 82nd never talked bad about their officers. Even if an officer was bad, they kind of felt like it was their fault and they had to protect them and they didn't want other people to know. It was like your one of your parents or somebody in your family's not doing something you're proud of. Like, we got to fix it. But you never talk bad about your unit. I mean, did you ever hear anybody talk bad about 3rd of the 4th that was in? Never. So she said that to this guy because he'd say he was in the Army, he said he was in the 82nd, but then he said, it's just not you. And she said to him, he said to her, oh, well, how would you know? And he said, well, my father was in the 82nd Airborne and I was around those guys and you just weren't one of them. And he goes, well, he was probably an officer. And she goes, well, yeah, he was. And he goes, well, that means he's a dick. And then I think she picked up an ashtray and hit him in the head and got in trouble. But she was like, hit him in the head and said, like, a guy in the 82nd would never say that. And her view of the 82nd was 3rd of the 4th.
Oh yeah,
but it's just not part of the culture. I mean, you just wouldn't do that. And it was just such an honor to be part of that. And when my daughter did that, I'm like, what are you doing? It's not what you're supposed to do. But a little part of me was like, wow, she really knew. I mean, in her little visits there, because she never lived up there. She lived down in Florida with her mom, but she knew what 3rd of the 4th was about. She did. Yeah. Just that exposure, and she knew it was something different than the rest of the Army. Maybe I shouldn't have told that story, but
no, that's great. That's great. So tell me some names of folks that you remember throughout the Army, folks maybe that were mentors to you or somebody that looked after you at a time.
Oh, well, Sergeant Major Adams, my first Sergeant Lear. uh, there was Lucier. I even why can't I remember his name? Because I talk about him all the time. Uh, he was proud to be a Lumbianian, E6, always would bring vegetables in. I love that guy.
Locklear.
Locklear was a great guy. I'm talking, it's Casadas?
Oxendine. I'm sorry, Oxendine.
Oxendine. What a legend. That guy, I mean, that guy was a career staff sergeant, but a legend. And he wasn't in particularly good shape, but nobody was going to boot him out. I mean, there were characters like that. And Major Cox was my boss for a while. But really, the senior NCOs, Edwards, are the guys that really taught me the most and took care of me. And Sergeant Major Adams, has been one of my heroes forever. I mean, I'm so proud to this day to call him a friend. I'm so proud that when I went to Georgetown and I got on the hockey team, I got to get student tickets and give him, and he's there sitting at a game with me, and it's like.
Awesome.
Yeah, I got a picture of that. I mean, and I tell you what, my wife threw a fundraising party at the house just before COVID, the Thanksgiving. He comes all the way out there and attends that. I mean, for as many people that love that guy, that he's taken time out of his life to spend with me. I mean, I feel very privileged by that.
I have always felt blessed by Wilbur V. Adams. Something about that man. I think everybody says the same thing, right? Everybody that I know that knows him feels as if there's something special about him, and there's a way that he magically or spiritually affects us, I believe.
Yeah, one way I would describe him that I think is very potent to describe him in my life is when he says something that is counter to what I believe, or he counters a point that I make. I really do, like in Ignatius of Loyola, self-examine of myself, because I think my default is I must be wrong or I must be missing something. And I tell you what, I'm not like that with a lot of human beings. Like if somebody thinks differently, I want to argue with them. If he checks anything I say, or even if we're not even arguing, if he says something out there and I'm like, well, I didn't see that or think of it that way, boy, I really examine. I really do, because I'm like, I have so much faith in that guy and know that he's so genuine and loving and such a quality human being that if I'm not seeing what he is, then the person I doubt is me. And I don't really say that about too many people.
I get it. I agree. You're right. You were right. Did you know Sergeant Falk, Command Sergeant Major retired Falk, who recently passed away in the past couple of days?
By reputation only. I didn't know him well.
Let's toast to Sergeant Major Falk, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Oh, hey, you see my Charlie battery guide on?
Look at that.
Yeah.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
But you were at the you were in my battery, but you were at the Jump Master School.
Right.
Come down and visit every now and then. So I always had a slot missing on the MTO.
Yeah, I was like an overhead. I was like the guy that provided nothing.
Yeah, but it was good having you up there. But when I went through Jump Master School, you weren't there. You were on leave or something, or went to somewhere that month. And like, so when you post pictures of all your Jump Master buddies from that period, they're all the guys I knew.
Oh, wow.
And I remember thinking they were older back then. Now they look so young.
Yeah, right. Isn't it funny looking at those old pictures? You're like, wow.
Yeah, I was like, oh, the big tall guy. I thought he was like this crusty old NCO. I don't know his name, but I know he's in your
Dan Bennett. Dan Bennett.
Yeah. And I just thought he was an old crusty guy. And when I passed, I was a reentry for JMPI. And so it was a second. So I had failed JMPI, was it 3 times? And then had to come back and re-enter for that. And that was really the first thing I ever failed in my whole life. I was like so crushed by that. And so I went back, and then I my first time through, so one guy, the re-entries always go last, right? I don't know if that, in my time, the re-entries went last. So there's a class of 80 people. And one of the re-entries, there were a handful of us, got a bee sting, and he was allergic to bees, so they let him go first, and he passed. Then 80 people went, and all failed. Everybody failed, and it was their first time in Jumpmaster in the main class, right? They all failed, and then I went second. And I'm like, there's no way that I'm going to, like, 80 people are going to fail. And then all of a sudden I'm going to, there must be some gig in there that we call it a trick fuck.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That they put in there that I'm not going to get. And I went through everything. And then one of your buddies, I could put on to him on a picture, said, okay, what's this? What's this? You said that. And they're checking my nomenclature. So I'm like, hey, maybe I passed. I mean, if he's checking to make sure I called the thing right, you get that second chance to say, if you said zipper, it's a slide fastener or whatever, right? And through, and then he was like, okay, yeah, you got all that. And he holds up the clock, and I was like 4 seconds over. Right. And I was like, oh my God. So I was doing the walk, trying to keep the snot bubbles from popping, and I was like, oh my God. All right, I gotta come in. I'm walking. And then that big guy goes, hey, sir, come here. You're not done. And I'm like he had more shit to me to do. And I put my hand up like, I'm like trying to keep myself together. And I don't want it to turn into, I didn't know. I was so upset. I didn't know what I'd do. If I'd bust out crying or I'd bust out cussing. I was just like, hey man, you have got to give me some space. And then I kept walking, doing this, and I kept walking. And he's like, sir, he was fucking with you. You passed. I'm like, what? Are you serious? And I came back, and then the guy was laughing around the corner. But I was like, man, you guys should not do that to people. But it was a rite of passage in its own way.
You're exactly right. It's really weird looking back on it, because they did it to me. They messed with me when I passed, and it was like everybody did. So when I became a hat, I asked them, I'm like, why are you always messing with everybody? Why you got to do that? And they're like, hey, it was done to me, so you got to do it to them. Every once in a while, if you like a student, then we always mess with them. If you like them, that's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah, and then we get to tell these stories. So it's nice. But I tell you, for me, it was scary because coming to think about it, I was so under pressure in Jumpmaster school. I mean, I went through Ranger school and was not under that much pressure. I was just hungry as shit. But I didn't feel that pressure. But in Jumpmaster school, I was like, I'm supposed to get a command. Everybody's looking. People are wondering how I'm doing. And all these people that invested in me are going to be let down if I don't make it. I never felt that much pressure in my life, before or after. I mean, that was the most. And when they did that, I didn't know how I was going to react. But I remember that I was so worried that I wouldn't get through there. I actually applied and got accepted to a PhD program. I was just going to change my career, and I was going to be so humiliated because when I was and I actually got accepted into the PhD program, but I got accepted a little bit after Jumpmaster school, and I had to tell these people that I was one of 6 people selected out of many applicants, and I had to say, well, I'm going to ride this 80-second thing out now. I'm a Jumpmaster. So I don't want to do that. That's not me. And that's a true story.
That's amazing.
That was the most pressure I ever felt. I even had I have a kid brother. He's in his 40s now, but he was 16 years old then. And he came down and stayed with me for the summer. And I had parachutes that I guess the battalion gave to me. And that poor kid was suited up all week long. When I wasn't in Jumpmaster, I was home JMPIing him. and I was doing this, and I think he could have passed jump master school with as many times, or he could have done the JMPI with as many times I put him through it.
You remember how much your fingers hurt? You remember that?
Oh yeah,
That,
yeah.
that
Oh, as a matter of fact, this pinky that's destroyed,
right.
that has been operated on. It locks up, and people think like, well, how'd you do that? Some cool thing like hockey, boxing, you know, all the stuff I did. You know how I really did it? I don't even answer the question, but going into that waistband,
no way,
and doing that every time I did it, that damn thing would dislocate or jam, and I have to pull it out. But that joint got trashed, JMPI-ing.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and it kind of sticks out there weird. That's an airborne injury. That's a jump master specific injury. And I did that with my brother maybe 1,000 times that summer.
Oh wow.
I was going to pass that. He still talks about how miserable it was. Because remember how miserable it was wearing that?
Yes.
Like, hold. And he's like, my thighs are killing me.
Looking back on that time, you know, I'm 52 now. So looking back on that time, I was 19 when I showed up at the 82nd. And you know, I was a sergeant at 21 years old. I couldn't even drink yet, and I was already a sergeant, even before I was 21. And that was wild times, you know, to think about all the, you know, we had a real mission. It wasn't no pitter patter army like you're in the Patriot land at Fort Bliss. It's like, you know.
Hey, I got another funny one for you. Okay, so I would sometimes bring my officers on a weekend when we weren't on when we were on DRF 9 or something, like when we weren't on you know, ready status, and or DRF 1. You know, when we were lower status, and we came off having to be locked down there and not drinking, I would bring them up to DC because that's where I'm from, and we'd have a place to cache there. And oh, by the way, I don't know if you remember Frank Cook, but Frank Cook and I went to high school together.
Oh wow.
Frank Cook and his mom and my mom sang in the same choir at St. Camillus. So Frank, and he was a little bit younger than I was. But we would come up and we'd bring all the lieutenants up there. And I don't know who, there was somebody else with us. I don't think Frank was there. But one time we came up and we went to this place, a place that was happening around here for happy hour was the Haypenny Lion. And, you know, these lieutenants that were in super good shape, they come up here to DC, and all these white collar workers up here be out of shape back then. So like these guys would just have a plethora of women that would be in, what, your paratroopers from Bragg? And I'm like, and they like thought I was the king for bringing them there. Right. So it was like, yeah, they were just very popular. So it was a great trip. And we one time went from the Haypenny Lion to this elevator to go to the garage after the bar was closed, or we were going to the next place. We get in the elevator and there's a big security guard guy, and the other guy was Ted Koppel. So I guess it's where his studio was. So Ted Koppel gets in the elevator and we're sauced. And Ted Koppel goes, hey, boys, where are you from? Like, we're from the 82nd. And he goes, well, hey, I just did a show, and you guys ought to get ready because there's some things going down and it looks like you guys are going to go someplace. And one of the guys said to him, oh, it was Doug Kaiser. You don't know him. He was an SF guy that was with us. And he goes, hey, look, Mr. Koppel, if we're all here drunk, nothing's happening. Yeah. So whatever you know on the news and whatever you got, nothing's happening because we're all here having a good time. We'd be gone. We wouldn't be here. And it turns out he was right. I don't know what it was, the story that was in the news that day or who was giving us grief, but there was, if the Bragg wasn't spun up about it.
Oh, wow. That is wild. That is wild.
But it also shows how much, when you say we had a real mission, it shows how much, I mean, we all believed in ourselves. I mean, we knew, I mean, down to the private, I mean, we thought we were so important that Ted Koppel wouldn't know anything about us. You know, like we know more than him. And I don't think that's the case elsewhere. I remember one time coming back, when I went to the Joint Staff as a captain, I was shocked that not everybody thought the 82nd was a be all end all. Like the guys in the Navy, they don't even give a shit about it. They don't care. The guys who are in the Army, they didn't care or maybe even resented it. So I would walk around class B's with my, all my, my jump master stuff. And Petraeus was up there. He came out of brigade command. So Petraeus and General Rippey was up there. And I was like, and Rippey was my senior raider. He was the ADCO when I was there. I don't know if you remember him. And the other one was the ADCS was Tackleberry, and kids called him Tackle Cherry. But I was up there. I was shocked at how people don't care about it. Like it's just not the center. It's not that they don't care. It's just not the center of their universe. I mean, if you're a fighter pilot, you don't think the 82nd's cooler than you. If you're a submarine guy, you ain't worried about the 82nd. I mean, but to me, I was like, how are you not reacting to this jump master? That, like, I know I'm just a captain and you're like an 06, but you're like an 06 in the net. I mean, like, I don't understand why you're not differential to me. Like, it was shocking to me. It's like, do you realize you're in the presence of a real paratrooper? Like, aren't you guys feel honored by that this captain's here with you? I mean, that's kind of how I thought. But I went back to brag back to 3rd of the 4th for a formal. And I went down there, and my old battery was around me. Edwards was back from Korea then. And I was like driving around these guys. And they said like, hey, so those guys up there, are you running the show? Like, my soldiers actually thought like I was a captain in the Pentagon telling everybody what they need to do because I was from 3rd of the 4th. And that's how they thought of themselves. So when I said to this soldier, paratrooper, I said, well, it's really, they don't really think about us that much. I mean, there's like a lot going on up there, and it was surprising to me, but we're not like the center of their universe in the Pentagon. I mean, like, we thought like the Pentagon, like, oh, we got a problem, Americans Guard of Honor, we got to call the 82nd. That's what they told us. And so when I told him that, he looked at me in like this disbelief and said, they just don't know. I mean, he couldn't even handle the story, and he was like an E3, It was like, they just don't know. And then I remember being in Burger King one time, and 2 of my soldiers were in line there at Burger King, and I watched an officer come in. He was a major, and he was from some other unit at Bragg. And my 2 junior enlisted soldiers that were in my battery, they didn't see me, but they looked at the major. They looked at his chest, they looked at his patch, and they looked at each other, and they shake their head and they rolled their eyes and just went through the line. And it's like, these young guys think they're way better than that major.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I loved that confidence. I loved that feeling of self-worth. And it wasn't mean-spirited or egotistical. It was just this faith that we are somebody special. And we're here to help you.
Well, what do you call it? Freedom pills.
Yeah, and they just felt so good about themselves that they're just like, oh, that poor major, what I don't know where he works, but I don't know what that patch is, and he's not a jump master. So if shit goes down in this Burger King, we're gonna have to help him. That's right. That's kind of how it was.
That's right. Do you remember putting that maroon beret on the first time?
Pardon me?
Remember putting that maroon beret on?
I do. And I do. And I remember the Underhill was the first guy I saw with, what I did? This is embarrassing, but I was a young guy, but I went to the entry officer advanced course, and I was a Patriot guy before I went to the 82nd. So that was interesting, going from being an infantryman. And most of my schools were at Fort Benning. And then I went to Ranger School. I went to ADA-OBC, I went to Ranger School, and then I show up to a German Patriot unit. I'm like, what the hell is this? It was like different to me. So then I went back to the infantry advanced course, which I had asked for. So that's where I did a year as a captain, but I had to go to the transition course. So what I did, because I wanted to wear that beret so bad, is I went from Fort Benning up to Fort Bragg, signed in, and said, oh yeah, I'm supposed to go to this school here to do the training. Oh, well then why did you come here? I wanted to say I'm in this unit when I get there. So I got to sew on the 82nd patch, and put on the beret. And then I was down at the school, and then Underhill was my assignments officer who came to visit Fort Bliss. He was a captain then, and he came over and he's like, dude, you got the pat? Yeah, I already signed in, so I'm official. I can walk. So I was at Bliss wearing the beret and a patch before I'd really been in the unit. But I drove all the way up just to sign in so I could do that.
It's crazy the things we do to be able to do some of that stuff, right? You know?
Yeah.
The badges and the emblems and the berets and different things mean a lot, right? You know,
Right.
you can give out awards and people will remember those awards forever, ever, ever.
They do. Yeah, they do. I mean, just wonderful people. And to this day, you know, on Facebook, a lot of my young soldiers from Charlie Battery, uh, like if there's something out there on, I mean, I really don't like this polarization in social media, and I'm trying to be careful about what I say out there. But then I don't, when I see something bad, I feel compelled to say something, but I try to be thoughtful about it. But I remember one time somebody said something, they didn't like what I said, so they said something not nice. And like these guys from Charlie Battery pounced on them. I mean, I've seen these guys in 26 years and said, like, look, I can testify. I've seen Captain Bodine in action and he'll kick your ass. And I was like, yeah, I don't need all that, but it's nice that they care. And they still feel like I'm theirs, you know? That's just wonderful.
It is definitely something special, the bond that is formed between a leader and those that are around that leader, either, you know, a leader of that leader or the led.
Yeah.
It's a great relationship that the Army has done a very great job of over the years, I believe.
Oh yeah, and that's Army wide. I mean, that's not unique to Third or the Fourth.
Oh yeah.
What's unique about Third or the Fourth is the power of that NCO Corps that just runs everything, and they have the advantage of homesteading.
Yeah.
You know, I remember when I was leaving Germany, I actually, after Germany as a lieutenant, after the Berlin Wall, the Army was downsizing. I applied to have an early out, and I was turned down because I was a month too young, and because I wanted to get out after that. And so then I said, when my time came up to go to the advanced course, I said, I'm going to get out. And there was a guy named Bruce Russell, who was my assignment officer. And he said, well, what can I do to keep you in? And I said, well, look, I want to go to the entry advanced course, and I want to go to the 82nd Airborne. And that's what I want to do. And he goes, really? Well, that's pretty easy. There's not a long line of people in air defense that want to do that. And I'm like, really? I'm like, okay. So he gave me what I wanted, and I stayed in. And then I made a career of it. But to the guys that go there, they get to stay there because there's not everybody wants that life.
Right.
And then when they get there, they own it. And nobody wants to give it up who's there. You know, go ahead.
Always thought that Korea for an NCO at Bragg was a victory lap. You go to Korea, you're the pro in Korea. You're the man in Korea for a year, and then you come back to Bragg. Because
you remember, like just before, yeah, you were there, but they had some kind of problem in a battalion in Colorado at Fort Carson, I think it was.
They stood up a new battalion at Fort Carson.
I thought there was a problem that something happened.
They just a bunch of guys.
Yeah, they took the NCOs because, and then those guys all eventually came back around. Yeah. But they took them because they know, like, okay, if you need leadership, this is where you're going to build. You're going to build something. You need to. This is the place to get it from, because it was a factory.
Oh yeah.
Of sergeant majors and first sergeants. I mean, that place was a factory. Oh, yeah. I mean, night. Man, I mean, just the list of sergeant majors that passed through that battalion's.
It is amazing. It is amazing. It is amazing. So hey, I've been doing this thing called Heroes I Know, and I would love to. I would love to take our conversation and post it up on Facebook, and post it on YouTube. And I'm gonna send you a T-shirt. And this is a little bit different than the concept that I want to do. Uh, what I want to do really is, I had a soldier pass away recently who he had throat cancer, esophageal cancer, and I didn't find out about it until he was already in hospice.
Yeah.
And I had all these pictures of him, and we spent 3 years together. He was Mason. He may have been on your rolls for a while there in 552 before we went over. And but I realized I didn't have any interviews of anything. And I was like, I'm going to do it. So I've got, we're going to send a T-shirt, a camera, and a light kit, and get a good picture quality, better than we're doing on here. And do an interview, like get them to salute and report and sign out. I don't know if you've watched any of those interviews. I've already posted some of them up there.
Yeah, I saw a couple.
And then at the end, I put together some slideshows. They send me some pictures. Could we send them a thumb drive? They put their pictures on the thumb drive and then send them back. And then at the end, we're going to give them a box with a coin in it and the thumb drive, and it'll go on their mantle or something. Hopefully it's a nice box. And their memorial service will have been kind of, at least from the military service side, will be taken care of. We will have an interview with the soldier that talks about the old times, why they joined, different kinds of things. And then the slideshow that'll go up there from their memorial service. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. And
what do you want me to? Oh, somebody I didn't mention was Dan Chavez. I think I am remiss, but he was my first sergeant too.
He was a great guy. He was one of my first sergeants in Korea. I love that guy.
Yeah, me too. Just such wonderful people.
Oh yeah.
I'm glad that you. I'm honored that you wanted to talk to me here and that you posted. And I just want to tell all my guys and the guys I served with at 3rd or the 4th, I absolutely love them. It was the honor of my life, and I'm so thankful that I got to pass through there and how they took care of me.
Amen.
Yeah. So how can I help you with this other thing you're talking about?
You what now?
How can I help you with this? The other thing?
It's not really any help. I just want you to know about it. And again, you're going to be a part of it in some way. I'm going to put this together, snippet this together, and I may ask you to do a follow-up sometime and send you a real camera and get some different questions out of you. But what I would love to do is I would love for all of my friends and heroes that I know their family not to be worried about what they're going to do when they suddenly pass away. Like all of a sudden, Sergeant Major Falk is sick and he's passed away. And it's like, wow, why haven't I taken the time to tell those old stories that he and I remember, like you and I have just taken the time to do? I've got it recorded. It's there. If my grandkid wants to watch it one day, they want to hear about what old great grandpa Marshall did, then, it's going to be out there somewhere. It'll be captured, your thank you to your soldiers will have been captured. Right.
Yeah, that's important to me. I mean, they can put on my tombstone, thank you.
Amen. Right. I feel the same way. Right. My soldiers propped me up like you have no idea. Right. As an NCO, and I'm sure you see it as an officer, your soldiers carry you on their shoulders is what they do. And all they ask that you do is just care about them just a little bit. And let's make sure the mission gets done, Oh,
I know. You make the standards the enemy, not you, and make people feel appreciated. And that should be, these command philosophies we used to write. That's all you need to say is make people feel appreciated. And, and that's the key thing right there. And they'll take care of you.
I love it. Hey, it's been great chatting with you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. You take care. Thank you.
Love you, sir.
Love you.